There is a specific kind of silence that happens right after the funeral flowers start to wilt. It isn't a peaceful silence. It is a loud. It's the moment when the casseroles stop arriving. The phone stops buzzing with "thinking of you" texts, and the rest of the world goes back to normal. You're standing there. The terrifying thing isn't just the sadness, it's the physics of it. It feels physically impossible that the sun still rises at 6 a.m., that the traffic lights still change from red to green, that people are still arguing about politics or sports in the grocery line. It feels like a betrayal. The sensation you are fighting right now is the desperate, clawing need to fix it. We are obsessed with the idea of restoration. When we break a bone, we want it set. When we cut our skin, we want stitches. When we lose someone we love, we want to know when the pain will stop so we can get back to who we were before. You might be looking at old photos on your phone, scrolling back 2 years, 3 years, trying to find the version of yourself that didn't carry this weight. You are trying to time travel. You are exhausting yourself trying to reverse engineer a tragedy, waking up every morning hoping that the heavy blanket of grief has lifted. And when it hasn't, you feel like you are failing. You feel like you aren't handling it well enough. But here is the confession. The thing nobody tells you in the sympathy cards. The you from before? That person is gone too. Grief is not an illness to be cured. It is an amputation. You don't grow the limb back. You learn to walk differently. The exhaustion you feel right now isn't just sadness. It is the exhaustion of trying to hold a heavy door shut when the wind has already blown it off its hinges. You are trying to keep the structure of your life exactly the same when the foundation has been detonated. And deep down, you are scared that if you let go, you will disappear into the black hole of loss and never come back. I want to tell you a story about a broken bowl. It's a story from the 15th century about a Japanese shogun named Ashikaga Yoshimasa. He had this favorite tea bowl, a beautiful piece of Chinese porcelain that he loved more than his palace. One day, disaster struck. The bowl slipped, hit the floor, and shattered into jagged pieces. Yoshimasa was devastated. He gathered the shards and sent them back to China, pleading with the best craftsmen to repair it. Months later, the bowl returned. But when Yoshimasa opened the box, his heart sank. The craftsmen had repaired it, yes, but they had used ugly, industrial metal staples to hold the pieces together. It looked like a Frankenstein monster. It was functional, but it was hideous. It was a reminder of the damage. The shogun refused to accept this. He handed the bowl to his local Japanese craftsmen and asked them to try again. They looked at the shattered ceramic. They looked at the cracks. And they made a radical decision. They didn't try to hide the damage. Instead, they mixed the lacquer with powdered gold. They painted the cracks. They highlighted the scars. When the bowl was finished, veins of gold ran through it like lightning. It was no longer just a tea bowl. It was something entirely new. This was the birth of Kintsugi, the art of precious scars. Most of us are like the Chinese craftsmen with the metal staples. We try to staple ourselves back together with distractions. We work 60-hour weeks. We scroll through social media until our eyes burn. We drink too much wine on Tuesday nights. Anything to hold the pieces together and pretend the crack isn't there. We think that healing means hiding the damage so that nobody sees how broken we are. We want to be the pristine bowl again. We tell ourselves the lie that if we just wait long enough, we will return to factory settings. But the philosophy of Kintsugi argues something different. It argues that the piece becomes more beautiful for having been broken. Not because the break is good, but because the history of the object is now visible. The gold lacquer doesn't deny the break. It honors it. The bowl is now unique. It has a story. This is the diagnosis of your pain. You are trying to be the pristine bowl, but you are now the bowl with the gold veins. The pain you feel is the lacquer curing. It hurts because you are expanding to accommodate a reality that is bigger and darker than you ever wanted to know. This brings us to a concept known as Amor Fati, a Latin phrase used by the Stoics that translates to love of fate. This is the hardest thing I will ask you to consider tonight. It does not mean you have to like what happened. You don't have to like the cancer, the car accident, the sudden heart attack. You don't have to love the loss. But Amor Fati asks you to accept that this loss is now an inextricable part of the fabric of your life. It is the gold in your cracks. Nietzsche described it as wanting nothing to be different. Not forward, not backward, not in all eternity. That sounds impossible right now, I know. But the alternative is to be at war with reality. And when you go to war with reality, you will lose only 100% of the time. The goal isn't to get over it. The goal is to integrate it. To say, this terrible thing happened, and it burned a hole in me. And now I will build a life around that hole that is deeper and more compassionate than the life I had before. You are not broken. You are simply altered. Now the question is, how do we actually do this? How do we apply the gold lacquer when we can barely get out of bed? I want to give you two specific mental models. The first is called the Pendulum Protocol. Psychologists Strober and Schutt developed something called the dual process model of grief. But let's call it the pendulum. We tend to think we should either be fully grieving, crying in bed, or fully moving on, ignoring it. We get stuck in one mode. The Pendulum Protocol requires you to deliberately swing between the two. You need to designate loss time and restoration time. It works like this. You set a timer for 20 minutes. During that time, you look at the photos. You smell their old sweater. You cry until your ribs ache. You go directly into the storm. When the timer goes off, you step out. You engage in a restoration task. You pay a bill. You wash the dishes. You go for a walk. You do not feel guilty for doing the task, because you know you have scheduled time to grieve later. You do not feel guilty for grieving, because you know you will do the task later. You swing back and forth. This movement prevents you from getting stuck in the mud of depression or the brittle shell of denial. The second tool is called the museum label. One of the reasons grief breaks us is that memories attack us at random. You see a specific brand of peanut butter in the aisle, and you have a breakdown. The memory feels like an intruder. The museum label technique helps you organize these intruders. When a painful memory hits you, imagine you are a curator in a museum. You are holding that memory, that image of them laughing or that argument you regret, and instead of shoving it away, you write a label for it. You mentally say, "This is the memory of our trip to Chicago in 2014. It hurts because we were happy, and that happiness is gone. I am placing this on the shelf in the Hall of Joy." By naming it and placing it, you stop fighting it. You acknowledge the artifact. You acknowledge the gold crack. You turn the haunting ghost into a catalogued part of your history. It gives you a tiny, microscopic moment of control over the chaos. It allows you to say, "I see you. You belong here, but you do not run this museum. I do." Listen to me. You are going to survive this. It doesn't feel like it right now, because the night is long and the silence is loud. But you are durable. You come from a long line of people who survived the impossible. You're not a glass vase waiting to be smashed. You're something far more resilient. You are the gold, and you are the clay. Don't try to hide the cracks. Don't try to paint over them with a fake smile or busy work. Let the scars show. Let them shine. Because those scars are the proof that you loved someone enough to let them break you. And that is a beautiful thing to carry. Be whole.